What an excellent day for an exorcism.
You'd like that?
Intensely.
They're here.
Is imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Black Cat's Shadow. And this is episode 12, where we are continuing our Horror 101 series. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the supernatural and paranormal subgenre of horror. And joining me as always is my co-host Dakota. How's it going, Dakota?
Oh, it's going. Ready to dig deep into the ghosts. I'm pretty psyched about my ghosts and my paranormal stuff. This is my other field of expertise.
Oh, cool. Do you ever do any ghost hunting?
Yeah, a while back. For anybody who's actually local to the Kansas and Missouri areas, I used to work at the Oswego Mesa Hospital, and we did a couple of the guys from security over there. We did a little ghost hunting around there. We found some pretty disturbing things, did a little research into it, and it is pretty interesting. I mean, ghosts are one of those things you can't quite understand until you actually experience it.
Yeah, I guess, when you're watching it on TV, when you're watching Ghost Hunters or whatever shows on TV, it's entertaining, but it doesn't really have a much weight with, it doesn't I don't know, yeah, I guess if you've actually experienced that stuff firsthand, it would be scarier. But yeah, you would understand the situation they're in more.
Yeah, and I mean, watching those shows doesn't really hold a candle to actually experiencing it, because when you're in an empty abandoned building and you start hearing the creepy noises and then actually seeing something move across the room that you can't explain, that's when you start to truly appreciate these movies a little bit more, and you start to actually know how scary it really is.
Yeah, that's definitely that would be kind of scary. I actually was a member of a ghost hunting group several years ago, and we went out and looked. We went out to a few places and we didn't really find anything when we went out, but it was fun. It's fun to kind of learn the techniques as far as catching audio recordings and taking pictures and things like that. But yeah, it's a fun hobby, and it's definitely is a field that's interested me because I definitely believe in the spiritual world, and things beyond this life, and so yeah, it's always something that's fascinated me. So this is going to be an interesting discussion for sure. So I guess to start off with, we wanted to define what the term supernatural or paranormal, and basically it's just kind of things that are out of the ordinary. Well, maybe not out of the ordinary, because a lot of horror deals with that thing, but it's kind of things that don't fit into the natural world. It's things that the laws of physics don't apply to, and things that you can't really rationally or logically explain. And so within that you have ghosts and demons and possession and things like that. Witches and just whatever else fits into those boxes, and and then within those, the paranormal, I think paranormal kind of means pretty much the same thing. I don't know. I think there's there's like slight differences between supernatural and paranormal. I'm not quite sure, but I think people just kind of use them interchangeably. But then there's also like preternatural and preternatural. And I don't know, Dakota, do you want to try to chime in and explain those two phrases a little bit?
Well, preternatural is basically like beyond what's natural. I mean, I'm taking it down to like the root definition. I mean, like with paranormal, para means outside, while normal obviously means average. So then we get words like supernatural. So it's above natural. Super and supra, like super means above, supra means below. So then we get into like preternatural, which is just below natural. So we really don't have very much leeway when it comes to the definitions, because a lot of root definition really can explain it.
This subgenre is the most closely related to Halloween. I think it's the one I think of whenever I think of like Halloween movies, things like that. You know, with ghosts and haunted houses and witches. And I also think, this is the one that people get scared of the most, and it just really bothers them sometimes when you talk about like demonic possession movies, and some people just don't want to have anything to do with them, and so it's interesting that this subgenre is like the scariest in horror to some people. And I guess when you think about the source of evil or the source of horror in these movies, it's a ghost or a spirit. And those are things you can't really kill or run from. They're always going to be there. Dakota, do you enjoy like the supernatural horror movies or paranormal horror movies?
Yeah, definitely. Like the newer movies, not so much. Like the Paranormal Activity movies, they do explain like vengeful spirits and things like that, and get into like the more demon-like things. I more like movies like The Devil Inside. I'm sure you've seen it, where it's a possession movie. I mean, I like that one specifically because it's a found footage type film. But movies like Exorcist or let's see, definitely The Rite. That one was a good like possession type movie. But The Grudge, Poltergeist, as far as like ghosts and spirits, just because they really do hit on like a lot of the key parts of what like spirits are. Like they're not necessarily just an evil spirit that's crossed over. They've been here and they've been living. They've been not living, but they're kind of caught between the two planes of existence. I mean, for some people that don't know, there's two different planes of existence. There's ours, and then there's like what we call some people call it the astral plane. I know a lot of comic book nerds are gonna like call me out. I'm gonna say, oh, that's a Marvel thing, but no, the astral plane is the plane of existence where spirits tend to live or tend to be when they're waiting to cross over to the other life.
Okay, so you're into the movies that portray the spirits as actual, like have they've been human in the past at some point, and is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like the unfinished business type spirits. Like spirits will cling on to things. I mean, like much like The Ring, good example. The spirit was clinging on to the videotape, and it was killing using the videotape as a medium. But things like that. See, poltergeists are just mischievous spirits that have been trapped in a particular object, and they come forward and they cause mayhem. So that's kind of what I like. I kind of like seeing the more realistic type of spirit movies.
Okay, I got you. So the ones that kind of match up with what you've experienced in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the ones that actually hit deeper on a more emotional level, on a more like more psychosis type level, because I mean it gets in your head and it plays tricks on you. That's kind of what I like. I mean, obviously touching back on psychological horror, but I mean those kind of movies get in your head and just make you think, especially if you've experienced it. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of ways I can explain it, but there's no other better way than actually experiencing it firsthand.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, if somebody had been like, I don't know, if somebody had, any movie that touches on something that you've experienced in real life, it's always gonna have more weight to it. It's always going to affect you more. So yeah, it's interesting. So within this supernatural and paranormal subgenre, you have like it's kind of split up. You have some several different types of movies within this. You have the first type is you have like ghosts and spirits. You have movies like Poltergeist and The Grudge, and that kind of deal with ghosts like invading somebody's house, or haunting a place or people, and a lot of what you may hear about J-horror, which is like horror movies that were made in Japan, and there was a certain there was several over. I mean, there's always been Japanese horror, but I think it really became popular like in the 2000s whenever they started making the American remakes. So when you hear people say J-horror, that's what they're referring to as the Japanese movies. But yeah, and usually within these movies, there's always something that happens that causes the haunting to begin, or causes the ghosts to take or the spirits to take action. Usually there's some kind of like curse or something like that. And like with the haunted house movies, they really are similar. You have movies like The Haunting and the Amityville Horror, which kind of deals more with like the house or the dwelling as a character. It's more about the location with a violent, disturbing history, and like the curse of the location, than about a specific ghost or a spirit trying to accomplish something. With movies like Poltergeist and The Grudge, you have spirits that have a purpose or have a reason for coming back. Now, Dakota, what are some ghost movies that stand out to you as being something that you like to watch?
I mean, like Haunting in Connecticut. I think that's what it was. Came out in like 2008, 2009. It was a great movie. Then, like, obviously, the Amityville Horror, the classic. Some of those haunted house movies, those ones really stick out to me too, just because of the experiences going into these haunted areas. I mean, you were mentioning the spirits, like the actual house being a character itself in the movie. That's true, but also like the spirit. I mentioned that like spirits will hold on to something and cling to something. I think that's kind of what those movies kind of portray. Also, the spirit clinging to the house. Something traumatic happened to them, and they didn't want to pass on, so their spirit would hang around with the house until something happens to the house that caused the people to be affected.
Yeah, and you also see like there's other items that spirits can have attachments to, like in that movie Annabelle, you see a spirit attached to a doll. There could be like in some movies there's spirits attached to like Ouija boards and things like that. And that's kind of gets over into another like kind of paranormal movie, like witches and occult horror movies, where humans, it's kind of usually in these movies, humans are practicing some kind of like devil worship or black magic. Movies like Black Sunday and Suspiria, you have some kind of group of people that are like kind of dabbling or actively practicing some kind of like black arts, black magic. And usually in horror movies, witches are portrayed as evil. They're portrayed as devil worshippers. They're often shown like sacrificing humans, both adult and kids. Or in these movies, the horror could be triggered by some occult meddling, like with Ouija boards or seances, etc. Like what Dakota was saying, like these evil spirits could be attached to like locations or objects. In these witch movies, they sometimes the threat is more human. You have like a cult that's murdering people or something like that. You have that kind of threat rather than a strictly paranormal one. I know for myself, I love like some weird cult movies where, there's kind of like usually in these kind of movies, there's like a town or small town or a secluded group of people that are just kind of doing weird supernatural stuff. Movies kind of like Children of the Corn. There's an old movie called Messiah of Evil, Pet Sematary, The Wicker Man, and Dead and Buried are just some examples of like the small town has like a dark secret or whatever. And I really like those kind of stories. Those are always interesting to me. These kind of out of the way places that are kind of weird. And
I do like Wicker Man. That was a great movie just because it did dwell into more of the like the more sciencey side of it too, I guess. Getting into the spirits, and also kind of touched on a little psychological parts there. But I mean, I'm not really experienced with the witch type movies just because I'm not a fan of like the black magic, the idea, the occult. I mean, movies that kind of delve into that. I mean, I guess you would say like the Hellraiser series kind of dealt with the occult a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It dealt with people trying to. I'm trying to remember now why the guy had the box. But, of course, like the puzzle box that summoned the like Pinhead and the other Cenobites. Like, I'm trying to remember. I think it was just. There was like they wanted to solve the puzzle. And I don't know if it was like eternal life or what it was exactly, but it was like some kind of promise of, some kind of reward that was promised. And I think that's usually, why people get involved in the occult, like in these movies. There's some kind of promise of power, or reward, and it usually kind of turns sideways on them. And what they get is usually not what they're expecting, and it's usually not a good thing. But yeah, definitely Hellraiser is a good example of that. You have like crazy things happening in that movie, and you have like these otherworldly beings that are summoned, and people think that they can control them. And that's kind of like another thing that fits into the occult. You have like these people that try to summon demons or things and other beings like that, and they try to control them, and they usually doesn't end up the way they want it to. And that kind of brings us into like the possession type movies, movies like The Exorcist and The Rite, and this is where people actually get controlled by a spiritual entity. And there's like a spiritual being that's actually inhabiting their body and taking control of their body. And I think like in The Exorcist, what made that such an effective horror movie was you had this little girl, an innocent little girl that was non-threatening, not even threatening in the least, but she gets possessed by this demon or, spiritual entity, and she just totally becomes this scary being, this thing. It's not even a girl anymore.
You get into movies like that, like specifically The Exorcist, just because it was, to me, it was almost silly, but I still loved it because of the idea of corruption that could enter the body of an innocent person, especially being as innocent as she was. I mean, that touches more closer to home, because for people that have kids like myself, I mean, you wouldn't expect some innocent little child to turn into this beast, but it's uncontrollable because of this demon or spirit entering their body. Another great one that I mentioned just a minute ago was The Devil Inside. It was such a great use of cinematography just to convey the horror. So that kind of made it a little bit more real for me.
Yeah, kind of, in that found footage style. You're kind of seeing it more from the character's perspective. It's like the first person perspective, and it kind of gives it more of a personal feel, or you're kind of like seeing what they're seeing, and it helps you to kind of like imagine what they're going through more. It's been a while since I've seen The Devil Inside. I need to rewatch that one. I just remember I saw it in the theater back when it first came out.
Yeah, I went and saw it in theater too.
Yeah. And then like there's this other type of supernatural movies where it kind of starts to cross over into more of the creature feature, where you have like a demon or actually like the devil, like a physical embodiment of the devil, or some depiction of hell. You have movies like The Evil Dead and an Italian horror movie called The Beyond by Lucio Fulci. It kind of is in that same realm as the possessed movies, but the people affected actually like attack other people. They're not just like, in most possession movies that I've seen, the possessed rarely actually, I mean, I guess in some cases they do attack, the people around them, but a lot of times it's more of like the psychological horror about it, like them losing control and just not being themselves. But in these other kind of like the Evil Dead movies, you have the possessed being very violent and killing the people around them, and basically the only way to cure them is actually to hack them up into little pieces. So it's kind of, and it kind of crosses over, like I said, crosses over into the creature features realm, but it's something I wanted to bring up because it is definitely an element of this subgenre, an element of the possession subgenre. And then you have another one that's really interesting to me, and I guess it would be what you call like maybe supernatural, where you have movies that kind of feature people with like, extraordinary abilities, sometimes like psychic or something like that, or even like, I guess mutants, but not really like creatures, but just like they have abilities. And but you have movies like Carrie and Scanners, so people that can like affect things with their mind. And sometimes these movies, they do have scientific explanations, or sometimes not. But sometimes the devil's blamed for these powers. And the person with the powers, it may be actually a good person, but throughout the story, these powers may corrupt them, or others may make them angry to where they harm others. And sometimes they just harm others because they don't know how to control their own powers. Within Carrie, she was an innocent girl, but she had these powers, and her religious mother, blamed the devil and said they were demonic powers, and she it ended up bad for her. She ended up killing everybody around her, because she was getting bullied and picked on and stuff. And Dakota, do you like these kind of movies?
Yeah, I think what kind of sets them apart for me was the fact that they like paranormal and supernatural. I guess the line gets drawn between what paranormal deals with ghosts, spirits, and demons. Supernatural deals with the more human element for it, where we get like the psychics, and I think witches kind of fall into supernatural too, where they have unexplainable powers that were given to them in some way, or given to them by the devil or by a demon, where they made a deal with the demon. They sold their soul for power or for corruption or for love. That's what kind of sticks out with me. Carrie was a big example of that. Not the remake, but the original, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
See, I'm not saying the remake wasn't okay.
Yeah,
it just wasn't good.
Yeah, and I agree. It wasn't necessarily like the worst movie ever, but it just, it wasn't necessarily needed. I don't know, maybe some people would argue, but it didn't really bring anything new to the table. I think, with an effective remake, you want to improve on the original, and like there's got to be a reason for it to be remade. Either the technology has gotten a lot better to where the special effects will be a lot better for the remake, or something like that. There's kind of got to be a reason for it to be remade.
Yeah, exactly. A movie that kind of fits into both these genres, the paranormal and the supernatural. It's a really good example. It's the Silent Hill series. And a lot of people are going to say that the movies were like crappy compared to like the video games, but I mean, the movies really kind of explain more of why things were happening, why the spirits were still there, why the damned still roam the earth. And that kind of is why these kind of movies stick out to me, just because you can do your own research into them, and it will open up a whole new world of horror, and it'll make you understand. Specifically, I know we talked about Mama. You just rewatched it, and I just watched it a couple nights ago. That movie really had a good explanation for like the spirits being there. I mean, the spirit had to be redeemed. She had to redeem herself, and I think that's where it connects to people, is that redemption, even for spirits, isn't too far away.
Yeah, I just watched it today, since we were talking about it. and I liked it. It was a good like ghost story movie. It definitely had like a fairy tale feel to it, Yeah, you had a spirit there that definitely had a purpose. They were, kind of seeking out their baby, and they kind of became a surrogate mother for the two young girls that, that wandered into the woods with their, through the course of the story, So the whole plot of Mama, if anybody hasn't seen it, we're going to be talking about it some. Probably try not to go into spoilers, but whatever, we'll talk about it still. So in Mama, you've got, it starts off with like this guy that he's like a executive at a company, and he like has a meltdown. There was some financial collapse or something, and so he has a meltdown, and he actually like shoots his coworkers. And then he goes to his estranged wife's house and shoots his wife, and then he kidnaps his two young daughters, and they just take off in the car, and he doesn't really know where he's going, and they're like in this wooded area driving really fast, and it's snowing, and the roads are just really slick, so he ends up driving off the road, and so him and his girls just end up like wandering off into the woods, and they happen to stumble upon this cabin in the woods. And so they go in there, and he's actually planning on killing his daughters, and then I'm assuming killing himself in this cabin. But what happens is there's what they don't know is there's this other being living in this cabin too, and what the girls come to call Mama. And so Mama actually saves the girls from their dad. And so that's basically the beginning of the movie, and it goes from there. Like they end up finding the girls, and the the girl's uncle actually ends up adopting them. But they find out that there's this being called Mama, and you find out that there's a specific reason why this Mama character is there. It's a woman that died kind of a tragic death, had like some mental illness issues. So she definitely had she had a baby, and and so there's. She definitely had like a purpose for clinging on to these girls and kind of becoming a surrogate mother for them. It was like a sympathetic character. So I definitely say check out that movie. It's pretty good special effects. It does have some jump scares here and there, but it's still not a bad movie to check out. Did you say you got your fiance to watch that one?
Yeah, I got her to watch it, and she was scared just because she went into it kind of feeling afraid. But I mean, she said that it's a good story just because she could sympathize with the character. She could sympathize with the character of Mama, and I could too. I mean, being a parent, it is hard. It is hard to watch to have your baby taken away from you, and that's kind of what happens with this character. Her baby is taken away from her in a tragic circumstance. So I mean, in all honesty, she's almost like a tragic villain, or a villain of circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she's just she's it's a woman that has mental illness and just unfortunately finds herself in this sad situation and tries to fix it, or get away from the people she feels like are hurting her and her baby. And they don't really go into a lot of specifics about what was going on at the time, but it was during like the 1800s or something, so she could have been wrongfully hospitalized, wrongfully put away, committed, whatever. Who knows exactly what. They didn't really go into the story to a great detail, but even within Mama, it's interesting. There was you do see possession to a certain degree at one point in the movie. And it's definitely it does kind of remind me of some of the Japanese horror movies, just because the ghost is kind of really abnormal looking. They have these elongated arms and stuff, and it's really creepy. But yeah, I would say it's worth a watch, definitely.
Going into the movie, a lot of people don't watch horror movies. Hopefully that's why they're listening to this. But those that actually watch it and actually can understand, a lot of these movies don't end the way you expect. So don't go into it thinking, oh yeah, everything's gonna be okay, that they're gonna defeat the ghost, because most cases you'll be wrong.
Definitely didn't predict the ending to Mama.
No, nobody did. I don't think anybody did, because I remember seeing it in theaters, and I think almost half the theater was like dead silent at the end of the movie because they didn't expect that to happen at all.
Yeah, it was. Without, I don't want to like give anything away. It was just, it's an ending that kind of like just came out. It didn't come out of nowhere, but it's just one that just kind of leaves you with your mouth open. You're like, whoa.
And they went there, but I mean, I guess you could kind of feel it deep down. You kind of see it coming just because of the story, the way the story has played out so far. You would understand that, like, history is doomed to repeat itself in a way, and I think that's kind of what the movie was portraying, is the fact that the spirit was on Earth. And I'm assuming she's done it before, because that cabin looked like it was from the 70s.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. It was like this cabin from the 70s, but it's like, man, it was still like, it really wasn't in that bad a shape for, being in the woods that long, but it was just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I was just kind of wondering, where did that cabin come from, and how did Mama happen to be there,
So that's kind of what I was getting at, was the fact that it's probably happened before. So like, in a way, it's this, like I said, the spirit's trying to redeem itself. So I mean, it's doomed to repeat the same process over and over and over again until they're satisfied and they move on.
I hadn't really caught on to that whole fact of it, that it's just been happening time and time again. Just keeps on like taking children and like, that's pretty creepy to think about. Definitely.
I'm actually going to list off like the top five horror movies for this genre. Number one, in my opinion, is Christine. Great example of a spirit taking possession of an inanimate object and using it and bending it to its own will. That's a great one too. Mama. I'm gonna go there. I mean, a lot of people are gonna hate me for it because it was such a I guess flop in theaters. The Exorcist. The Grudge. And then The Devil Inside. Those are my top 5 favorite supernatural horror movies. I mean, I definitely, if people haven't seen those movies, go out, like, rent them, buy them, or whatever, because those are the best examples of the supernatural and paranormal horror you can get at.
Oh, cool, yeah. I was trying to think, while you're talking, I was trying to think of some of my favorites. I definitely... the Amityville Horror is something I like a lot. Like the old one from the 70s. Poltergeist is good, although funny enough, I like Poltergeist 2 better than the first one. And it's probably not as good of a movie as the first one, but it was more entertaining for me. I like The Exorcist a lot. It's pretty good. I'm not as big of a fan of the J-horror stuff, like The Grudge and The Ring, just because I don't really know why. I think because I'm not really sure why. I just never really like got into it. I mean, they were decent movies, they were scary and everything, but it just wasn't something that I wanted to like watch over and over again.
Just like a kind of a disclaimer, for anybody who kind of feels a little bit brave, that they want to try to do ghost hunting, don't try to do it yourself, because you will fall into kind of a slump, and it will affect you in weird ways. Parapsychology is the study of paranormal investigation. Don't go into it thinking you're an expert just because you know how to work the equipment. Find a group of people if you want to try it. I'm not endorsing it in any way, but find a group of people and try it, because you will see your outlook on life changed.
When you start studying things like that, whether or not you're a believer, it definitely makes you think about things, in a different light. But yeah, it's the perfect time of the year to be talking about these kind of movies, because Halloween is fast approaching. And like I mentioned last episode, we are going to be doing and here in October we're doing weekly episodes. So next week is going to be our Halloween episode, where we're going to dive into the mythology of Halloween and take a look at Hellions from 2015. From what I can tell, it's a movie about a woman terrorized by little demonic trick-or-treaters or something. I don't know. It should be a good time, though. I'm looking forward to watching that one.
Yeah, definitely a great movie.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check that out here soon. Dakota, how can people get a hold of you? How can people reach out to you on social media if they would like to?
Everybody, if you want to get a hold of me, obviously, we're on Horror Amino. You can find me at either Rainstorm. It's all one word. It's RAIYN Storm 01. You can find me on there. I'm getting ready to get back more involved a little bit. I kind of hit a writing block with my novel here, but best way to get a hold of me is through Andy. I mean, other than Horror Amino.
Definitely, if you want to get a hold of us here at Black Cat Shadow, some of the easiest ways are email. Our email is blackcatpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at blackcatpodcast. Like he said, you can find us on Horror Amino. And I really want to focus on Horror Amino and start posting some more things on there. Because we have really good responses on there. It seems like people it's easier for people to see your stuff on Horror Amino, so I definitely want to focus on that more. Have some really cool fans on there. And then, you can find us on Facebook as well. Yeah, that'll do it for us for this episode. And this will actually conclude our Horror 101 series. So like I was saying, next week is our Halloween episode. We're going to be back into our Mythos Macabre. So look forward to that. I know that we are kind of get back into our regular format. And so remember, guys, to take a closer look at the world around you, and you may just find it as stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat Shadow.